Hello there. Labour's class war and politics of envy are back with a vengeance. If Keir Starmer's future Labour government deems that you live in a well-to-do area, your services will be cut and the money diverted to the poorer areas, presumably in the belief that the wealthy will be forced to buy in private doctors, private bin men and private police, or go without, while still paying eye-wateringly high taxes for the benefit of everyone else. Jeremy Corbyn lives on within the head of Keir Starmer, despite whatever he says. I've heard many a time that the red streak runs thick and deep within Keir Starmer. And Labour won't have to make any huge changes to the law to get this done. They could get this in train very quickly, because they would use laws that have already been enacted, which could lead to the Labour government having the power to cut libraries and bin collections for the wealthier, put up their council tax, and maybe even reallocate policing, education and NHS services out of their areas. This would all stem from the 2010 Equalities Act, where under Section 1 it says, "An authority to which this section applies must, when making decisions of a strategic nature about how to exercise its functions, have due regard to the desirability of exercising them in a way that is designed to reduce the inequalities of outcome which result from socio-economic disadvantage." Must do so. No ambiguity in that class war, communism in a clause, is there? And no doubt lefty lawyers will be queuing up to help people in poor areas to take their authorities to court for judicial review if not enough money is reallocated to the poor. Wealth redistribution in the waiting. So why isn't this happening already? Well, that clause, although within a statute, it has not yet been commenced. That means it's not yet in force. Laws are set up in this way so that governments can get their ducks in a row before they bring certain clauses into effect by commencing them through a statutory instrument. And Labour, who brought this Act in at the end of their time in office, didn't have time to commence this Clause 1 before the Tories were victorious in coalition with the Lib Dems in the 2010 election. But once Starmer gets into number 10, they can then issue that statutory instrument and get it voted through quite quickly. Then all authorities will be bound by law to take socio-economic disadvantage into account in their decision-making. So not only would central government have to allocate money accordingly, so would local government. A rich neighbourhood would see its services decline over time as those in the less well-off areas had those increased. But of course there are many property-rich but cash-poor people in some of those rich areas that would be deemed as wealthy by Labour, and many elderly residents as well. I wonder how they'd fare under Labour. Anyway, former Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg called this taking the scythe to success, not so much a class war as a war on aspiration. The Mail on Sunday also says that the Labour plan is to extend these equality laws to cover race, gender, disability and sexuality among the inequality of social class. So tax money will be allocated on the basis of ethnicity and gender as well. That effectively means that we will be taxed on the basis of things like ethnicity and gender because that will be the outcome. It's going to be a difficult few years for straight white men then, especially of the older variety, no doubt. But Labour might have one little difficulty here. They might have to define what a woman is. Now Labour is pointing back at the Tories and reminding everyone about Rishi Sunak telling the Tunbridge Wells Tory faithful last year that he had managed, as Chancellor, to move money out of poorer estates back into wealthy areas like theirs. But the Tories would claim the previous funding arrangements had been too skewed against the well-off. So the class wars march on. But there will be long-term consequences here. Consequences that the hard left among Labour supporters would welcome with glee. The wealthier areas would over time become less attractive places to live. And unless the residents clubbed together to keep local services going, they could end up with crumbling roads, long travels to see GPs, no local schools, as well as other intermittent services. The once poorer areas, though, would be thriving with all that extra money coming in. But this is where it turns sour for the socialists, because all that money going into poorer areas would be quickly followed by the wealthy as they started moving in, especially wealthy families searching out the best state schools because Labour has ruined the private education sector by slapping VAT on it, and the wealthy elderly wanting better access to healthcare that they foot the bill for, or those searching for better public transport because the hard Labour net zero plans leaves them with no affordable personal transport. The wealthy could start to price the poorer out. How would our commie Labour Party deal with that one? And all the while, that previously rich area would become more run down by the year. It would eventually become the poorer area and have to have money diverted into it. If anyone's left living there, that is. Could be a great way to herd the people into more concentrated areas, though. Then pen them into their allocated 15-minute neighbourhoods, maybe? Now, there may be another aspect to this as well. There has been talk that if Rishi can keep the Tories semi-on track, then Labour might win the most seats, but it might end up without a majority. If Starmer wants a stable left-wing government, he might then be forced to form a coalition with the Lib Dems. But the Lib Dems are second choice in many Tory-held areas. So if the Lib Dems do end up gaining Tory seats, will they want to see Labour rip their constituencies apart in this way? They got bitten by joining the Tories in coalition and supporting the Tory student fee policies. Would they allow themselves to be bitten by this as well? And also remember that the Lib Dems were in coalition with the Tories between 2010 and 2015, and as far as I can remember, during that time they did not push for Clause 1 of the 2010 Act to be commenced. In fact, they might campaign against it at the next election, or at least try to stay very silent on it. Anyway, the Labour Party in true hard-left fashion thinks that the people's money is their money to splash about as they wish. That the equality of public services across the land is a nasty racist and sexist outcome. That true equality is only attainable by kicking the out of anyone who does well in life and then redistributing their wealth to others, because they somehow deserve it more than those who made it in the first place. Aspiration will become a dirty word, unless you aspire to give more of your money to the state, of course. Then you can be as successful as you like. All for the greater good. Just like in all those other successful communist regimes around the world. Russia, China, North Korea, etc., where it's always for the greater good of those in power.